Welcome to the Tough Decisions Network for Entrepreneurs. I'm Dan Hanford, and my wife, Danae, and I interview successful people sharing stories behind tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey as an entrepreneur. On the podcast with us today is Pat Yates. He is the owner of Happy Feet, which it was on Shark Tank back in 2014. He's an entrepreneur, and we're so glad to have him on the podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Pat.
It's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
Hi, Pat. We're looking forward to chatting with you, and we want you to get us started just by telling us and our listeners where your current focus is in your business.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We are centrally focused really on one project. For me, really about the last 12 months that we've been working through this. We have a new product release that we developed. It's a new patented slipper item that does direct-to-garment print that's called Slippers, which zips on and off. The top comes on and off, so you can actually exchange out the top and use images of your own or images that we template, and you get 4 tops to 2 bottoms, so you can do mix and match, you can do different things. It really kind of as creative as anything we've ever done. That's the first thing, but also we're launching it in conjunction with 3 of the biggest licenses in the world. We're doing Disney, Marvel, and Pixar, and not only these slippers, but figural slippers starting, obviously October 1, 2018, and we've been previewing those for about a month, and my whole focus has been on launching what is probably the biggest thing we've ever done, I guess.
Well, that's pretty exciting. And before we get to talking through some of your tough decisions that you've had to make along this journey, talk to us a little bit about, what impact did being on Shark Tank have for you and your business?
I've talked to a lot of people, and I spent a lot of time with entrepreneurs that, have to do with how their experience was on Shark Tank. And many hate it, many love it. Some don't know. There's people that have gone in and out of losing businesses and some that have thrived. My experience was fantastic. I mean, for me, it was really, really good because, I still work with Robert, even though the deal that we had on the show completely changed, and it was better for both parties. We didn't end up doing it in financial investment at all, but we got the access, and we got the people, and we got the ability to grow. I just recently met with Robert, but the impact for me was more in the alliances I have within my business and the relationship. When I first started, we got the DreamWorks license, which ended up on Beyond the Tank and also our Shark Tank update. And Robert went with me to those meetings and obviously gave a level of credibility that I probably couldn't have brought to a major studio license. And that tumbled down into what we're doing now with this Disney, Marvel, and Pixar, and probably the biggest relationship with a manufacturer that owns 4 factories that does all the manufacturing of all of our licensed goods now. And that's probably the biggest thing that came out of it. So those relationships actually sort of propelled my business even further. While it didn't put money in my pocket that day, it actually put me in a position to where I could do just about anything I felt like I wanted to do.
Well, that's pretty exciting because, we don't sometimes hear a lot of the backstory behind some of the people that are on Shark Tank. And, my wife and I, record Shark Tank all the time and watch it all the time and love the updates and things like that. And, I remember your particular episode and even beyond the tank stuff that you had done. Talk to us a little bit about a tough decision that you've had to make along this journey that maybe didn't have that good of an outcome for you. I like to kind of call it the sore thumb tough decision, if you will, and maybe some of the lessons that you learned through that tough decision.
Well, I think that there's a couple. One predates Shark Tank and one postdates it. Predating it, I sort of went really hard into retail when I first started this business back in early 2002, or when I bought it out for my family. And it was sort of one of those things that, it leads into one of the good things. But one of the worst things I did was to expand too quickly. I went into retail and kiosks and a seasonal business that cost a lot with relation to product. It cost a lot with relation to logistics and things. And I didn't make a lot of money at it, but I built up a huge distribution. And what we did was we were basically robbing Peter to pay Paul to continue to grow that retail business because the margins were so thin. So it was one of those things that was a calculated decision by me, but it was something that actually just didn't work out very well. That industry was dying and it was bad. But, it's sort of, and I'm not trying to jump here, it sort of led me into what was really good about it. What was great about that decision actually made me look at my business, concentrate on the 80-20, what made me the most profitable, what made me the most successful, and then from there try to adjust. And I got rid of that part of the business and started going to direct internet. So there was a lot of reasons why that core decision still worked out very well. As far as post-dating Shark Tank, I don't really have one that was a bad that I regret, but I did a horrible job with the DreamWorks license. And we just did a really bad job with it. We didn't realize the kind of maintenance it was going to take to be able to pull something like that off. We went really deep into the product levels before we knew the kind of buying patterns that would emerge. We just went really quick, excited. And instead of taking a pause and saying, let's look at the downside versus all the glitz and glamour. When you walk in and see, Katzenberg and you're with Robert and you're with their licensing team and they're willing to sign you that day and you want to do it, you just get jacked up and get excited. I forgot to slow down and think. And unfortunately, that cost me a little bit in the implementation of the license. I learned a lot of real difficult lessons throughout that. And couple that with the fact they got sold in the middle of it. And that became even more of a challenge when they were sold into NBC Universal. So it was really tough, but it was one that taught me a lot of lessons that hopefully I take away into these new ventures and can make it more successful.
Well, and I want to, go back to your first tough decision, kind of pre-Shark Tank days. That's something that I do on a regular basis in my businesses. And I think it's a very key thing to talk about, sometimes, like you said, we try to expand things too quickly, but sometimes even as we're expanding, we should step back and go, okay, let's look at the 80-20. What is the 20% that's really producing the most revenue for us and start to cut out some of that 80% so that we can, start to focus more on the 20% to be able to increase our revenue even more.
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. What happened was I made some mistakes that turned out to be really big for my business, actually, because I was in a position to where doing the mall distribution, once those temporary kiosks shut down, there was only one place to get it, and that was online. So I started building these leads back in early 2002 before my internet started going big, and we went from a website that did 20,000, that did 40,000, did 90, did 120, did 500, did 800. Now it's a multi-million-dollar website. And what I did was I built early notoriety on the back of people that were selling them inside the malls. And even though I knew that was going to happen in a sense, I had no idea how big that would be. So it's funny how things work out. When you make certain mistakes, they tend to form what you do in the future. And I always try to trust myself with relation to my decision making, and that's one that I still trust to this day, even though it wasn't great from its own unilateral standpoint.
So let's shift here a little bit and talk about a tough decision that you made and it had a really good outcome or even, a better outcome than you had expected and some of the lessons you learned through that one.
I mean, there's so many. There really is. I mean, it's like I made a decision to buy the business out for my family because I saw a completely different path. They kept it really small. It was very, 20 or 30 locations for kiosks. I bought it and went to 300. And even though I said before that I regretted that, it started to build the website. I think one of the biggest decisions that I made, to make myself successful is to basically keep the main thing the main thing. And what I mean by that is that I started to figure out the 80-20 that the internet was going to be the best. So what I started to do was really try to find ways to enhance that by adding lines, by adding licenses, by really pushing to get onto Shark Tank. And clearly, obviously, one of the biggest was to get onto Shark Tank. And it really happened sort of by accident, which is weird because I applied in season 2, got turned down. They called me back for taping of season 5 and said, would you like to reapply? And honestly was about not to do it because it was so encompassing. It took so much time. And I was about not to do it. And I made that decision finally to go ahead and reapply. They brought me out. I was one of the last people added. I was taped on the next to the last day. And it turned out to be, honestly, what some people say they think is one of the better episodes they've ever seen because, I make this impassioned plea to Mark about entrepreneurship and how you dig in and build a business. And then Robert came back in and the whole thing changed. And all of a sudden I made this decision right at the end that made for great TV. I didn't know how it was going to turn out because it felt really bad for about an hour, but it, again, I think that was really the best. And everything that I've had since then, I've really grown based on, the increased strength mentally that I pulled from that and the confidence I pulled in the business from being on Shark Tank and all the things that have happened since.
So talk to us a little bit about these strategies that you use when you are faced with a difficult decision. And you've told us about several specific ones, but how do you make your decisions?
That's a great question. And it's actually one that every entrepreneur should think deeply about before they actually start making decisions. I can tell you right now that my first, and people say this all the time, it sounds like cliche, but your first inclination typically is right, and 90% of the time it was. When I've trusted my gut and my judgment, provided that it's not like saying, okay, well, I got to spend $1 million on this piece of equipment. There's certain things that could backfire. But when it comes to strategic decisions, to licenses, all those things, I have to trust my gut on it. And when I do, I'm extremely successful. I'll give you a great example. Well, in 2009, I was partnering with another guy who was distributing the slippers, and we were actually growing the web business significantly. And my son, this is the whole Snooki story. When my son walked in and said, Dad, Snooki's wearing your slippers on Jersey Shore. And I said, well, I have 2 questions. Who's Snooki and what's Jersey Shore? I had no idea. I honestly did not know what it was. So I walked in, he rewound it, and I saw her wearing them. Well, most people would be like, that's really cool. Maybe you get it. But we ended up getting a bunch of business out of it. People bought those pink slippers. Well, I called my partner at that time and said, I'm going to see if I can get a license agreement with her. And he went, you're out of your mind. And I went, no, I'm not. I said, I want to see if I can get a license with her so she can start talking about her product, maybe make her own line. We'll do some designs around her. He went, I don't think it's a good idea. So I trusted my judgment, and I went and met with one of her managers in Chicago. I sat and had dinner with him, and I offered them 6 figures to be able to pitch our slipper line, which most people think's asinine. Well, what happened was we designed the line. She crashed our site every time she tweeted out about it. It put us on the David Letterman show. It put us on Fallon. It put us on Leno. It put us on the Today Show. It put us on Good Morning America. It put us in front of America. And it was something that I trusted my gut on. And there was not one person that thought I should do it. Not one.
Huh.
And I trusted it. And I knew that what it would do. And that still to this day is something that we leverage in a significant way. She had 1 million Twitter followers now. She has 8 then. Now she has about 8 million. And while most people don't think she's that big of a star, and she's probably not like a typical big star, she did a lot for our product line. So that's the best way I can explain it, that I have a feel for things, and I feel like I know in my gut if it's going to work out well. Has it always worked out well? No, but it is the 80-20. 80% of the time I've trusted and it's worked.
We're going to take a quick break now to hear from one of our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk to Pat about some of his favorites as it relates to business.
Have you ever thought about investing in real estate, but find yourself so busy that you don't have time for it? Do you have FOMO, which is the fear of missing out? At HanfordCapital.com, we help investors with passive real estate investments that project better returns than traditional investment vehicles such as the stock market. If you'd like to find out more about our passive real estate investments, visit HanfordCapital.com. That's HANDFORD Capital.com. We will jump on a call with you to discuss your investment goals and to see if our investments are a good fit for you. This advertisement is not to be construed as an offer or recommendation to buy or sell a security. Visit HanfordCapital.com.
And we're back now, and we want to talk to Pat about what we call the trifecta, which is a series of quick questions about some of your favorites in business. So let's start it off by asking you, what is your most favorite technology that you use in business right now that makes your life easier?
It's probably our systems. We use, for our shipping and stuff, we use ShipStation. We use SKU which is a local company that I work with here in Louisville that does our warehouse and management systems. And I think those things just make my life so much easier. So it definitely would be those kind of things. I have obviously an iPhone, but that sometimes follows me everywhere, so it gets a little daunting.
Pat, what's a favorite quote that you've heard that has helped you as an entrepreneur?
The first time I ever bought a business or started a business was back in 1990. I was working for a guy here in Louisville, Kentucky, and I sat down with him. He was a longtime entrepreneur, and he had built convenience stores here in Louisville, Kentucky. And I asked him what I should think about. And he said, Pat, always remember that you're moving from a meal ticket to a soup line. And you're going to be in a position where you're going to have to work much harder for much less for a long time. And sometimes it pays off and sometimes it doesn't. That's the best advice I ever heard, because it prepared me for what I had to deal with. And it also put me in a position where it put me on notice that I better be willing to do whatever I can to be able to make sure that it works.
Say that quote one more time.
Yeah, you're moving from a meal ticket to a soup line was as simple as he could put it. And while it could pay off very well in the end, there's no guarantees, and you have to be willing to grind every single day. You got to outwork somebody. I think it was Lori Grenier or Barbara, who didn't like me at all, by the way, that said entrepreneurs are the only people that try to take an easy route by working 80 hours instead of 40, or I don't know how she put it, 80 hours a week versus 40. So, but yeah, it's basically the same thing. I mean, it's just, you really got to be committed and you got to be working.
And what's a favorite book that you've read that has helped your decision-making in your businesses?
I read a lot of digital marketing books and things like that to try to stay on the edge, but I still say to this day the best one I read was Delivering Happiness by Tony Asang from Zappos. He wrote a book that had to do with customer service and being committed to your customers, and it was just so well written. Maybe it didn't have the best information in it all the time, but it was one that I just couldn't put down. I read it a couple times, and it's just, to me, it was fabulous. And it's all basic knowledge, of things that you need to do. I read a lot of blogs. I read a lot of online content anymore, which I think most people do. But I still, to this day, think book-wise is one of the best.
So, Pat, what is the next thing for you right now as an entrepreneur on your vision or your dream board?
Well, as I said before, we're right in the middle of launching the biggest thing that we could ever get. I mean, Disney's the biggest license in the world.
Absolutely.
So we're doing the biggest thing that we can do. And the line is, I can't even describe it. It's going to be 38 or 40 figural styles. And put that in perspective, we've had 60 animal styles over 11 years. and we're introducing 38 or 40 figural styles between Disney, Pixar, and Marvel. So right now I'm keeping my eye on that. Bigger picture, obviously, one of the big goals that I've had is to start a business incubator that I can help build businesses for people locally and regionally in Louisville. That's always been a goal of mine. I haven't been able to get to it because, frankly, the demands on my time become very difficult. I do a local TV show here that's like Shark Tank, and I inevitably end up doing a lot of pro bono work, and there's only so many hours in the day. So I have to get to the right position to where I can, get into, the time frame where I can make that work. But that would be a long-term goal, is to teach and innovate and grow with people. That's what gets me excited. It really is.
So, Pat, how can the listeners reach out to you to kind of follow you more, or maybe, touch base with you, or, how can they reach out to you about, maybe even looking into this new product line that you have as well?
Well, they can find me anytime at my email, pat@buyhappyfeet.com. I am more than willing to answer emails to anyone that's an entrepreneur and try to help them. I do Skypes with high school classes. I go to colleges and speak. I do all kinds of things, and I'm more than willing to discuss anything that can help an entrepreneur grow. So they can feel free to reach out as much as they want to. And believe me, when our show episode airs on CNBC, I typically get about 50 of those emails. So there won't be a shortage of them around. So they're more than willing to. If they want to, they can feel free to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Pat, for taking some time out of your busy schedule to be with us here on the podcast. It's been very insightful, very impactful, and look forward to having you on a future episode as you continue to grow as an entrepreneur.
Great. More than willing anytime you want.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Pat. Hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to the Tough Decisions Network. Be sure to visit toughdecisions.net to gain access to show notes for this episode and to join our free weekly entrepreneur email, where we will send you news about the latest technology for your business, inspiring quotes, and the latest books for entrepreneurs. That's toughdecisions.net.